Warning, the Renegade Recruiter is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned. Prepare yourself for the no bullshit, zero fluff. Quick, dirty, and uncensored secrets for any serious recruitment, staffing, and search business owner who wants to earn more money with less work and fewer headaches, without having to kiss ass or bend over backwards to please anyone. He's a relentless and fearless renegade who will stop at nothing to reveal the harsh, unforgiving, and brutal truth about what it really takes to succeed in this business. He's a guy people love to hate and hate to love. It's your host, Terry Edwards. The Renegade Recruiter is unleashed.
Hello. This is Terry Edwards from terryedwards.com, and welcome to another episode of The Renegade Recruiter Unleashed. And of course, we're joined by our co-host, Drew. How are you, Drew?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Terry. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. And it's with great pleasure we're again joined by Jeremy Lazarus. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good, Terry. How are you?
Yeah, very good indeed. Very good indeed. Jeremy, for those that don't know, we've interviewed Jeremy before. Jeremy is an accredited master executive coach and certified master trainer of NLP. And as I've joked about it many a time, Jeremy's actually a trained accountant and a corporate treasurer. But despite all that, he's a very, very interesting individual. Well, I met Jeremy, 15 years ago when I did my NLP, around about that time. So we go back a while.
We do, Terry.
It's great to have you on again, Jeremy. Always enjoy interviewing you. So thank you very much for joining us, Jeremy.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
And by the way, if you listen to this and you haven't yet listened to the first show we've done with Jeremy, then I recommend going back and listening to that. Because some really good stuff he shared with us in that first interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeremy, what are you going to be sharing with us today?
I'd like to talk about something called values. Now, it's not the accounting values. You mentioned I used to be an accountant. I'm not talking about that. It's about, I suppose, what's important to people. So everyone's got values in different aspects of their life. So, for example, what's important to you in your work may be very different to what's important to you in a relationship. And I want to talk about how you can use values to manage people, to recruit more effectively, to motivate people, to sell more effectively, and to coach.
Excellent.
Awesome.
That sounds great. But before we get into that, Jeremy, as I said, we go back a long, long way, 15 plus years. How does somebody go from being an accountant to being a coach?
That's a very good question. It's a long story, but essentially I reached a point in my career where I guess I wasn't fulfilled in what I was doing. And I went on some personal development courses. And what I realized was, one, the only person who was stopping me getting what I wanted was me. Two, that I really wanted to make a difference, which is probably not what most accountants would say. And the third thing is that I came across this thing called coaching, which most people now in 2017 or whatever, we'd know what coaching is. But in 1999, not many people had heard of it. So I came across coaching, and long story short, just set up my own coaching business. I quit my job one day, set up as a coach. And then as I was progressing, I came across NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I just learned more, studied more, because I wanted to make even more of a difference.
Right.
Awesome.
And you talked about some personal development courses that you attended.
Yeah.
Of those that you attended, which one sort of really resonated with you?
Well, I did a whole series of courses with an organisation called the Landmark Education.
I know them well.
And it's a bit like Marmite. You either love it or hate it. But I found it very useful. I learned a lot of skills about coaching, even though it wasn't a formal coaching course. I learned a lot about coaching. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people, and I'm really interested in people, again, which is not what most accountants would say. So that was a big part of my initial study. Since then, I've done all sorts of courses, and obviously run Been running training courses since 2000 myself.
Yeah. I mean, two things there. I also attended Landmark education a long time ago, and I'd say for me it was a life changer. So I can totally get why you said that. And I've also attended a lot of your courses as well, Jeremy.
Yes.
I think I've never asked you. Perhaps I could put you on the spot here a bit. So perhaps I've asked you this offline, but there's a record that you often play on your courses when you want the room to get back in together. Can you tell us what that record is and what that means to you?
Yeah, it's a song called "Free" by Ultra Nate. And the reason, this is quite a personal thing I'm going to share, but I'm happy to do it. Basically, the first course I did with Landmark is, I think it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then a Tuesday evening. And I remember driving to work on the Monday morning, so after the Sunday, and I'd been through a lot that weekend, and I was seeing things very, very differently. And this song came on the radio, and basically some of the key words are: you're free to do what you want to do. You got to live your life the way that you want to do. And it really dawned on me that I actually was free at 37 years old. I was actually free to go and live the life I wanted. And it just that moment really, really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And one of the things I would want for anyone, well, everyone in the life, but certainly people who I coach or train, I'd want them to see how free they really are, and to make the choice they want, to live the life that they choose to live, not what society tells them to live or what their parents told them. It's what they want to live the life they want.
Yeah, and for you, Landmark education kind of opened your eyes to that.
It did, and I have to say, sort of, I've spoken to people since. I've gone back and looked at one or two of their courses, and it seems now, with what I know now, quite basic, if I'm really honest. But at the time, with where I was, it really opened my eyes.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. And Jeremy, this is a question that sort of we like to ask just to break up the interview a bit and also to get to know you a bit better. But can you tell us something that most people don't know about you? So an interesting or funny story, something that you don't normally share with people that they wouldn't normally know.
Okay. So I used to play football semi-professionally, and there was one game I played in particular. I'm Jewish. I'm not religious, but I'm Jewish, and I played at the time many years ago for a team that was one of the best Jewish teams in the country. And we played a cup final, of like the Jewish cup final, basically. Yeah. And I was 18 years old, and I got a bit overwhelmed by it all. And basically, we lost 3-2, and I was a goalkeeper. All 3 goals were down to me, which was not pleasant. Yeah. But you can imagine, because when you're a goalkeeper, you can't hide. Basically, if other players can hide, but a goalkeeper you can't. So basically, I had a good look at myself in terms of why did that happen, and I learned so much. So sometimes the most challenging experiences, and it really was challenging, if you turn it around, you can turn it to your advantage. Because what I learned about myself was I learned how to manage my own emotions during football matches. And so for the next, 13 years of my footballing career, I was able to cope with the sort of pressure that I wasn't able to cope with when I was 18.
Okay.
So for people listening to this, things may seem bad at the time, but if you turn it around, you can take any situation and turn it to your advantage.
And just on that, I mean, you said that the sort of the big takeaway you got, the big thing you learned was you learned how to manage your emotions. How has that, if at all, how has that helped away from football, like in your business or personal life?
But primarily in the workplace, we have challenges. I have challenges, and I guess most people do. And sometimes I do presentations in front of very large groups. And, as a human being, sometimes I get a few butterflies. I've learned how to manage that so that even though I may have butterflies, but the butterflies don't have me, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm in control of the situation rather than the situation controlling me, which means I can, inverted commas, perform at my best, which serves the people in the audience, because that's really what it's about. It's about the listeners, the viewers, the people who I'm training. I want them to get the most from it.
Yeah. Fascinating. Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. I actually thought you were going to share something you shared with us offline about your singing.
Oh, would you like me to do that? Okay, very briefly. Okay, again, I mentioned I'm Jewish. So when I was 13, I had my bar mitzvah and basically had to sing in the synagogue. You know, it was part of the Sabbath ceremony, if you like. And my grandmother was there crying her eyes out. Now, she told me she was crying because she was so proud. But I know that's not the case. I've got the worst voice on the planet, worst singing voice. And I think she was just crying because she was so embarrassed that her grandson, who she loved so much, could have such a terrible voice.
I'll tell you what. I think,
there you are.
I think we should be the judges of your awful singing. A bit later on, we're going to get to sing for us, Jeremy.
I don't think so. Your listeners would have a sore ears if you please. Let's do everyone a favour and let's just stick to values, I think.
Okay, fair enough. So values, the way that you summed it up there when you defined it, it's like the rules for an individual, and it is, for what you said there, if I got this wrong, it's context relevant. So it might be values for work, or like you said, for a relationship, or for anything really, for purchasing a pair of socks.
Exactly. So rather than being rules, I would say it's what's important to someone, what someone looks for. So, you mentioned a pair of socks. I'm assuming your listeners are listening, wearing a pair of socks. When they bought their socks, there was things that were important to them. Could have been the style, the price, the colour, the size. What's important to you in your career or your work or your business. Could be challenge, could be motivation, could be variety, could be recognition. What's important to you in a relationship could be shared values, could be sense of humour, could be trust. So values are what's important to us, what we look for, what we want in any particular area of life. And as I said, I've given some examples. Generally, values can be quite abstract. So, for example, Terry, you and I, we could have the same value. For example, trust could be really important to us in a business relationship. And the way you define trust may be very different to the way I define it. So because these values are very abstract, they can mean different things to different people. And I'll say more about that as we go through this talk.
Excellent. And you're saying that these values can be used, be it for coaching, be it for
recruiting.
You can use it for recruiting, coaching, selling, managing people, motivating people. So I think they're incredibly useful. You can use it for conflict resolution as well. But if we stick to, I know what most of your listeners are going to be interested in terms of recruiting, selling, coaching, managing people.
Excellent. Yeah, you take it away then, Jeremy.
Okay, so I've mentioned what values are. I've mentioned why they're so useful. Basically, if you can find out what's in, let's take one context just to make it simple. Let's say you're a line manager and you want to manage one of your team members really effectively. What you would do is you would ask him or her what's important to them, or what they want, or what they look for in their career, job, work, whatever the right word is for that person. And then you listen to what they say. So if they said things like variety, challenge, recognition, making a difference, fun, working with good people, if you listen to what they say, write down in their words what they tell you, and then ask a couple of other questions, which I'll go into in a few moments. If you know this about them, then you can use that information to help them, if possible, to have as much of their values as you could possibly give them as their line manager. Now, to an extent, obviously, your hands may be tied. If someone says, I want to double my salary, you might not be able to do that. But the chances are you could give them things like recognition or challenge or variety if that's what's important to them. Does that make sense?
I've seen this. I've seen this being used in a negotiation situation and in a recruitment situation, and it's extremely powerful when you get this right. So, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research on this. I mean, if I just give one piece of research that people might want to read up on. In about 2008, there's a report which came out by McLeod. It's called the McLeod Report, and it's basically on employee engagement, and all sorts of really useful statistics. And essentially, one thing that stuck in my mind is that employees join organisations, but they leave managers. So they may join an organisation. Let's say, I'm going to use one purely as an example. They may join the NHS, for example, because they really want to make a difference and help people to be more healthy. And they may love doing that. But if their manager is really bad and mistreats them, the person will almost certainly leave.
Yeah.
So for line managers in any organisation, if you can find out what's important to someone, to each of your team members, and then do what you reasonably can do to help them to have as much of what's important to them as you possibly can, then you will, people will come to work because they want to. They'll go that extra mile for you. Staff turnover will fall and productivity will rise. And that's what the McLeod report found. And it's certainly something I've found in all the work I've done coaching and training people.
And I can give an example. I was talking to somebody only 2 days ago. This business owner actually let one of his consultants go. And he actually used the words, he said quite frankly, Terry, this guy, and he hesitated, he said it was just a complete and utter conflict of values, which I thought was quite interesting. And this consultant was an extremely pessimistic individual. And my client is extremely optimistic. And my client said it got to the stage where he didn't look forward to going into work and meeting this consultant who'd only been with him for about 6 weeks, because this consultant would always see the negative side. So, my client would say, what great weather we're having. This consultant would say, yeah, but it's going to rain very shortly. And it drove him. He joked about it. He said, I wanted to put my hands around his neck, but it was a classic example of what we call a conflict of values. By the way, none of them were right or wrong. It was, in my opinion, it was just a massive conflict of values. And again, I'm sure you'll verify this. Most conflict is due to a conflict of values.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. Absolutely. And I'm happy to talk about that now. What I was thinking of doing is just to go through literally the step-by-step kind of questions that people can ask to find out someone's values. And then I'm happy to talk about sort of things like conflicts of values and how this all ties in.
Yeah. So what are the sort of step-by-step questions you can ask to find someone's values?
So in terms of the actual questions, I'll give you the questions, and at the end I'll talk about how you can introduce it as a line manager or a salesperson or a coach. But the actual questions are that the first thing is you'd ask, once you know what the context is. So if it's, for example, if you're a manager and somebody thinks about their job as a job rather than work, what's important to you about your work? What do you want from your work? What do you look for from your work? So it's what's important to you? What do you want? What do you look for? True for some of your clients, if they're coaches, if they're looking to sell, they would say to prospective clients, what's important to you? What do you want? What do you look for from a coach?
Yeah.
The bit at the end, you just fill in the blank. And then, so you'd listen to what they tell you and make a note of it in their words and give them a few moments to actually tell you. If they're pausing, be quiet and just let them answer the question. The only questions I ask at that time, apart from the ones I've mentioned, is what else? So if they're paused, I say, what else is important to you?
And is that just to get them to just elaborate more?
It is, and also to go a bit deeper, because sometimes the first things that people say come off the top of their head, and actually when they pause and reflect, they'll give you other values which are perhaps slightly deeper and often even more important.
Okay.
So it depends on the situation, but often you'll get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even more values. So, and that part takes 2 minutes typically. It's not a long time. It takes a minute or two. Then you'd ask them to think of it, to look at, either to look at the values or you just repeat them and say, so if you had all of this in a job, or if you had all of this in a coach or a pair of socks for that matter, would you want it, or is there anything missing? So you're giving them the opportunity to add something to the list if there's anything missing. Sometimes I'd add one or two things. Sometimes I say no. That if I had all that, that'd be great. So that's the second thing. So you second question. The third question is you want to get them to rank the values. So they may give you a list of 10, all of which are going to be important, and some are going to be more important than others. So when I'm doing this with my clients, I get them to rank A's, B's, and C's, where the A's are absolutely essential. There could be 3 or 4 A's, for example. B's are important but not totally essential, and C's are the icing on the cake. So A is essential, B is important but not essential, and C is, if you like, the nice to have or the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And there may not be any C values. If you're doing this in a selling situation, you may have to be a little bit more flexible. So you may just ask them, okay, what are the key ones here? What are the top 3 or 4 ones on this? So you may have to be a little bit flexible. But the key purpose of these questions is to get the first set of questions is to find out the values. The second set is to find out the ranking or the really important ones.
You're listening to the Renegade Recruiter Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.therenegaderecruiter.com.
There's a couple of things here, Jeremy.
Sure.
When I've seen this in operation is that kind of digressing this, but interesting, when you ask this question, a lot of our clients say that their clients buy on price alone. But when you ask your potential clients in the context of the service that we provide, what's important to you, price will often not come up at all. And if it does come up and you then ask them to rank it, it's often third or fourth on the things that are important to them, which is quite revealing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've found this I've done this work, since 2000 and probably thousands of people. The vast majority of people would say what you've said. They may think money's important, but it's very rare it's number one. How many people buy the cheapest pair of shoes or the cheapest car or go on the cheapest holiday? They want value for money, but most people will pay more for something that fits their values because there are things that are even more important to them than money.
That's right.
Awesome.
That's right. And once you've question for you, Jeremy, once you've elicited their values, so let's say they say, as a supplier, I want reliability. I want to know that you've got a track record of delivering on this. You have experience in doing this, and perhaps, let's say, price or fee or whatever. And then they've then ranked it. Would you, at that stage, ask them the question, so if I can show you, I can do X, Y, and Z of your values, and could you actually take them down that road and say, would you go ahead then?
I probably ask a couple of other questions first.
Okay.
It depends how much time you've got, but I'd probably ask a couple of other questions first. So I do partly what you said. So I'd say, so just to clarify, if you had a supplier that gave you that was reliable and you listed out the top values, would you be interested in something you'd want? And what you'd expect to see is a very definite yes. At that point, I wouldn't endeavour to sell to them, not just yet. But it's a good question to ask at that point. What I'd want to do is find out what they mean by reliable.
Okay. Of course. Yeah.
Find out what they mean by I can't remember some of the other values you said, but to find out what they mean by each of those, certainly the A values, because as I said earlier, using an example with you and I, Terry, trust could be important to you, could be important to me, but we may mean very different things by it. Because values are so abstract, they will mean different things to different people. So I'd want to drill down to find out what they mean by these.
Yeah.
And then I would look to demonstrate how I could do that. So how my service was reliable in their terms, what they mean by reliable.
Good point.
That is a really key thing.
And Jeremy, at this stage, like, what if sort of their values don't match your values? Did you sort of stop the conversation there, or where do you go from there?
Pretty much, yeah. If I have the belief that if what I'm offering is not what the client wants, I don't want to inverted commas, force them to buy from me or try and persuade them, because for one, it's going to be hard work. They probably won't want it, and they'll probably regret buying from me. When I run my training courses, if I've got someone in the room who really doesn't want to be there, it's really challenging. Your coach clients, for example, Drew, my guess is that if they're coaching someone who really doesn't want to be coached, it's not much fun for them. So if I can't provide what somebody wants, if there's a sort of mismatch in values, if I know someone who is more suited, I'll refer them.
Yeah.
Which of course will build trust. And I would spend my time, effort, and energy on finding people who are looking for what I can provide, and we've got compatible values. I won't necessarily be identical, but where there are compatible values.
Yeah. And I suppose that same rule really applies if you were recruiting and you said, in the context of this role as executive director XYZ, what's important to you in this role? And they say autonomy, decision-making process, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then if the client can't match that for that candidate, it's the same thing, isn't it? There's no point forcing it and trying to put a round peg in a square hole. Exactly.
It's a recipe for unhappiness and disaster. Whereas if you can match the values, it's a win-win all round. Going back to when I was being an accountant, in some of my later jobs, I was a square peg in a round hole. My values, I didn't know the words at the time. I didn't have this vocabulary. But what was important to me, what I wanted in my work and my career, was very different to what was required to be a group chief accountant or a finance director. So I wasn't doing a great job for them, and I wasn't happy. They weren't happy with me. When I moved and found something that did fit with my values, I felt much better, and the organisations found an accountant who was right for them.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So to me that's this is what values is about. It's about finding out what's important to someone, what they want, what they look for, and then matching that as much as you possibly can do.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions or comments? I wanted to mention sort of some things you could say before you even start the values conversation, but do you have any questions or comments at this point?
Not from my point.
No, not from my point of view, not other than what we've sort of asked already. So yeah, you carry on.
Okay. So I suppose the question is, what could you say before you ask these questions to encourage people to be open and honest with you? Because I've had line managers saying, oh, well, I couldn't ask my staff these questions because they wouldn't be honest with me. Or I've had salespeople say, oh, it's too difficult to ask my clients these questions. Here are some ways that you could, what we call pre-frame it, how you could introduce the topic so that it's most likely that you'll get honest answers. If you're a line manager, excuse me, if you're a line manager, you could say something like, when you're talking to your team or your staff member, as your line manager, I want you to be really happy and fulfilled in your work. And in order for me to help you to be fulfilled, be helpful if I knew some things about you, some things that were important to you, what motivated you. I promise I'll do whatever I reasonably can do. And my hands are tied, obviously. There's some things I can't do, but I've promised that I'll do whatever I can do to help you to have as much of what's important to you as possible. And there are some things that I say I can't do, and I'm not a mind reader. So if you don't answer me honestly and openly, there's nothing I can do. So on that basis, are you willing to answer some questions openly and honestly? The staff will almost always say yes.
Yeah, it's a great question.
And then you go straight into those questions I asked before. What's important to you, what do you want, what you look for in your work, the ranking, and then the check, and then drilling down into those values to find out what the person means by variety or challenge or recognition.
Yeah.
From a selling situation, it could be, you'd say something like, I find that my clients all want to be profitable and successful. Is that something that's interesting, important to you? Of course, the client's going to say yes. Or the prospect will say yes. You then say, so in order to help you to be more profitable and successful, I usually find that there's some questions that when I get honest answers from them, from you about them, it's going to help me to help you to be more successful and profitable. Is it okay if I ask you these questions? Again, they're going to say yes, because you're going to tie it back to things which they're bound to want. They want to be successful or profitable, more efficient. If it's a public sector. And then you just go straight into the values elicitation. What, Drew, you could say, what's important to you? What are you looking for from a coach? Or your clients could ask that.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of ways to pre-frame or to set up the conversation so that the staff member, prospective client, etc., is going to be most likely to give you a straight, honest answer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. That's well pre-framed. That was. Thanks, Jeremy.
You're welcome. Anything else, or do you want to talk about? Terry, you mentioned about conflicts.
I'm really interested in this. The conflict. Wars are caused because of conflict of values. Relationships end because of conflict of values. So please share with us around conflict of values. So
some thoughts. I'm going to use a very simple example. Generally, people, as you said, they don't fall out about the details. They fall out because of lack of, the mismatch of values. So the classic example with partners, they're arguing because someone left the lid off the toothpaste.
Yeah,
that's not really what they're arguing about. They're arguing about hygiene, or tidiness, or lack of respect.
Oh, good point.
See what I mean? And so the lid off the toothpaste is an example, but really what's behind it is that one person may feel that it's unhygienic, or that it's really untidy, or that if I've asked you to do it and you've left the lid off, therefore you don't respect me.
Yeah.
I'm not really massively into politics. My guess is that a lot of political arguments or even wars are about values and things like security and respect and sovereignty, all these abstract words which people hold quite dear, which are really important to them.
Yeah.
So values have got many uses, and they can help resolve conflicts. They can, as I said, manage people, motivate. You can use it for team building as well.
Yeah.
So the questions that I asked before, you can ask them to a group, so the team comes up with the values for the team.
Yeah. I remember a friend of mine went for a job. It's quite a senior role, sales role. And at the end of the interview, the client said to him, look, we want to take this interview further, but you've come through a search firm, and we don't want to use this search firm. So what I'm asking you to do is to go back to the recruitment company and tell them that we're not going to take this any further, but we will be in contact with you because we do want to take it further. And, and he actually rang me, and he was quite distraught about it. And he said, I just can't work for them now, because if that's what they're asking me to do, that says something about them. And he said it's in conflict with what I believe.
Yeah.
But sorry.
But no, sorry, exactly. It's about values, isn't it? Honesty,
that's right.
Trust, integrity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's good that he found out. It was a he, wasn't it? Good that he found out before he signed up for them, before he started working for them.
That's right. That's right. Because clearly, in their world, it was okay to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, guys, do you have any other questions about values, about how you could use it? But your clients. Anything that would be helpful for your listeners?
Yeah. So I suppose, in summary, what's important is, I suppose, if you summarise this, is to understand what values are, and then understand that for things to work in any relationship, you must have similar values.
Compatible values, yes.
Compatible. That's better. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Compatible values, And if you're the provider of a service, one of your roles is to understand your prospects' values and how they rank those values, and whether your service is compatible for what they're looking for. So if you go to extremes here, if a client said, the most important thing to me is I want the cheapest price, and that's not what you do, you're more about providing the quality service, then you say, that's great, I respect you for that, but we're clearly not the organization for you.
Yeah. And if you know that Fred Blogs down the road is very cheap, then we put those guys in touch, and so absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. And to elicit those values, you talked about how you pre-frame it beforehand, because you're right, asking a complete stranger what's important to you at the very beginning is going to be challenging unless you've got that rapport with the person, and you've given the potential client the reason or the benefit to them in why it's important they answer these questions. Have I summed that about right, Jeremy?
Perfectly.
Yeah, excellent. And when things go wrong, be it in the relationship, be it in a supplier and a provider, be it between governments, even between friends, it is often then a conflict of those values. Though they're not necessarily from what you've just said there, Jeremy. The conflicts of values aren't necessarily verbalized, because, like you said earlier, I might say one of my key values is I don't know, honesty. And my interpretation of that may be slightly different to what you mean by honesty. Have I got that about right, Jeremy?
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand what people mean by the specific, by their values. So, using the word honesty, if an employee says I need to work for an honest organisation, find out what they mean by honest. If they say they want recognition, find out what they mean by recognition, because the line manager's version of recognition may be very different to the employee's version of recognition.
Yeah. Excellent. And if you've got compatible values, that relationship of any kind is more likely to work.
Yes.
Be successful.
Yes.
Excellent. It's a really important subject, isn't it? This whole thing with values. It's you don't realise.
When I run my training courses, this is one area, one of the key areas where when I take people through it, you really see the light bulb go on. Whether it's for salespeople or line managers or coaches, they really get the importance of this. I've done work in organisations where I've trained managers to have these kind of conversations with their staff. And the results are excellent.
Of course, yeah, excellent. Jeremy, as usual, that was fantastic. Really insightful. Really that's the word.
It's got me thinking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't mind sharing, Joe. So you said there about leaving the top off the toothpaste, and that isn't what. And then the conflict or the disagreement, but that isn't what it's really about.
Yeah.
That was a real. I thought, yeah. So me not taking the rubbish out when my wife complains to me about that, that's not what it's really about. I'm going to remind her. I'm saying, Jeremy says this isn't really about me not taking the rubbish out, is it?
Oh, Terry.
And I'm going to give you your contact details as well, Jeremy. So you can.
Thank you very much.
Seriously, buddy, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, mate?
No, again, Jeremy, it's been brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
My pleasure, Drew.
Thank you.
Actually, just if people want to find out a bit more, should I give you some information?
Yeah, just like to ask you that, actually, yeah.
Okay. So on my website, which is www.thelazarus.com.
Could you spell that, please, Jeremy?
Yes. THE. And then Lazarus, LAZARUS. So www.thelazarus.com. If they go to the resources page, free resources, they can download either chapter 13 of Successful NLP or chapter 14 of NLP for Business Success. These are 3 chapters which cover the topic of values. So I go into this in more detail, and the exact words I use, or the process is outlined very clearly there. If people want to find out, if people prefer audio, then I've got some CDs on the topic. Probably the best thing is just to email me, jeremy@thelazarus.com. If they want to read a whole book, then those 2 books I mentioned, NLP for Business Success and Successful NLP, cover this and a lot more about NLP and success and communication in the workplace and in your personal life.
Excellent. And again, we asked you offline, but just to double check, you're okay with us, with people connected with you on LinkedIn?
Perfectly okay with that.
Yeah,
Twitter, absolutely. Jeremy Lazarus. I've got one of these names that there aren't too many of us around. So just, absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. Perfect.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Drew, anything you want to add?
No, again, just to remind you about the up-and-coming Lead Genesis event, where we're going to show you how to generate more leads for your business. If you head over to terryedwards.com/Genesis, you can find out more about that. But yeah, again, apart from that, Terry, nothing else to add.
Brilliant. Yeah. So that's the 29th and 30th of November, 2-day event. So it'd be great to meet you there, Jeremy. As always, we've sat in hotels and wherever and just chatted in it, and it's always enlightening, Jeremy. Thoroughly enjoy it and thought provoking.
Thank you.
So thank you very much indeed. So this is Terry Edwards from terryedwards.com. Thank you ever so much for listening. Drew, again, thank you very much for your input as well.
Okay.
Excellent. Until next time, take care, take action, and be relentless.